Hey everybody, this is Michelle.
And this is Julie. And we're coming to you today in this gorgeous August day in Seattle. I just came home from a very fun barbecue that was down on the water there in Golden Gardens, Michelle's favorite place.
The nude beach.
Okay, disclaimer, it is not a nude beach. We just pretend it is when we're using examples. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of close to nudity there, just a lot of little bikinis and stuff.
I mean, the G-string bikini is the thing now.
In Seattle?
The G-string is a thing.
The G-string is a thing. Around here, really?
I see them everywhere.
They wear like Birkenstocks with their G-strings?
No. But yeah, the G-string bikini. Yeah. I'm sure it always has been in places like Florida and Hawaii and I don't know.
Where it's warm all the time and people have a tan.
But it's, yeah.
Well, shout out to my gym friends, because the gym I go to put on the barbecue and they had 4 different studios there. So there were a lot of people I didn't know, but everybody was super friendly and they had amazing food and great tunes. And I brought Cash. And of course, that was always fun. He got to dip his toes in some salt water.
The dog.
The
Not
puppy.
Cash. You're like, I brought Cash. I was like, what'd you buy?
The
dog.
The Cash man, the dog. But yeah, anyway. So today we have got a kind of a meaty topic here that we are going to get into. And I think we have a couple of disclaimers before we get started, because we did originally say we will have raw topics and controversial topics. Okay.
Controversial.
Sorry, I always say it wrong. Controversial topics. And, maybe some things that we maybe agree or disagree on. And that's kind of the fun of this whole podcast. Mm-hmm. And this particular episode, I think, might do that. What do you think?
I think so. I think we have a lot in common on this topic. And just based on, well, let's just get into it.
All right.
Yeah.
So
otherwise,
by the way, you guys, the topic... The topic is spirituality versus religion, not versus meaning up against, but the differences between the two is what we're trying to do.
Religion and spirituality. Yeah. The commonalities, things that people might see as differences. I don't know.
Well, I think in our day and age, I'm starting to notice anyway, that a lot more people, at least the ones I'm around, are very spiritual people. They believe in God. They seem to fulfill that relationship in different ways instead of they fill that relationship in different ways rather than more organized religion. Yeah.
And I know we're going to get into this. You said spiritual people that believe in God. No, I know. But therein, the topic we're going to be talking about is like, just because are only the people that believe in God spiritual?
No, you're right. That is one of the things we're going to get into.
So when you said that, I was like, oh, yeah. Well, there's just like all these things.
I know. So just for everybody's background, Michelle and I have had the benefit of growing up in religions that were kind of, I think Michelle's was way more conservative than mine.
I don't think so.
Oh, girlfriend.
Maybe?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you're strict. I should say stringent. And maybe it's because your parents both followed that. My mom was almost a nun. I don't know if I ever told you that.
Yeah.
She was almost a nun. Thank God she didn't become a nun. My dad wasn't Catholic. So it wasn't something that we practiced in the same way at home. I mean, like with my mom and stuff we did. And Catholic school and Catholic church and all that stuff. So I think
the religions themselves are just as conservative and strict, but maybe the way we were brought up, I was probably more.
I just feel like yours is kind of more strict. And honestly, if my dad had been Catholic, it probably would have been different.
Did I say I was brought up Mormon? I don't know, even though I'm sure I've said that in the past. I don't know if I said it.
She was brought up Mormon, now, but 8 kids in the house, and she used the baby.
Yep.
Yeah, and I have my sister and my brother, and my dad, again, as I mentioned, was not Catholic. So, our Catholicism didn't even start officially till my sister and I were baptized when we were 6 and 7, respectively, or 5 and 6. Anyway, we were older, and I remember my mom making these really pretty little dresses, which, by the way, she kept. And the priest who did our baptism happened to be the priest who was later recognized as one of the pedophile priests that was in Seattle.
Oh.
So kind of interesting. I mean, he wasn't interested in us, obviously. And we weren't in the church that way. We had CCD and things, but I think he was more into...
what is CCD? That sounded like some kind of sexually transmitted disease. When we had CCD, I was like, what is that?
CCD is it's like Catholic curriculum training.
Okay.
If you don't go to Catholic school and you're Catholic, you go to CCD and then you learn about the church and all of that. So you guys were like 7? When you were baptized? I think maybe 6.
Is that
No, babies. You get baptized
that's what I thought. That's why, because in the Mormon church, you're 8 years old when you're baptized. Okay. And that is the way it is.
And do you know why they wait till you're 8?
They pretty much, that's the age of accountability. That's when you know right from wrong, when you're making choices. So,
do you get confirmed?
Yeah.
How old are they when
Same. You get baptized and confirmed all in one shot.
We used to, when I was a kid, the kids got baptized at birth, or within a couple of months of birth, and then you were confirmed when I was confirmed in 8th grade, and then it changed to be in like junior year in high school. They changed it to be a little bit older, and so my kids, of course, were going through all of that and very rebellious when it came to Andrew. Was the one that was like, I'm not going. It was like first time he ever really behaved like that, and I was just like, why not? I wasn't expecting him to give me such a hard time about it.
Yeah.
But he's been the one questioning things. So we'll get into that a little bit later too, because it really kind of speaks to some of the things that we've come across, as we were preparing for this. So anyway, both of us grew up in organized religion and raised our kids to some degree. And I raised my kids, you raised your kids in organized religion. And then it's kind of dropped off, since they've gotten older. Do you still identify with the Mormon church?
No.
Mm-mm. So I would say that there's a lot of things.
What do you mean by identify with? Like, do I say like I'm Mormon?
The practices.
Yeah, I'm not a practicing Mormon.
Like the practices of the Mormon church. No, you drink coffee.
I drink coffee. Those are the things that I think people think of right off the bat when it comes to Mormons. Yeah. Oh, you don't drink coffee, or you can't have Coke, or things like that. But
does the Mormon church own the Coca-Cola?
I don't know if they do. A disclaimer, I don't know all those little nuances about the LDS church, but we do drink Coke.
Yeah.
Well, see, I said we.
Yeah.
They do. There's a lot of Mormons that drink caffeinated drinks, and for some reason
it kind of goes back to how fundamental they are with the beliefs.
Honestly, it's been about 10 years since I've gone to that church. Practicing.
Right.
So I don't know. I feel like there's probably been a lot of changes.
More than likely.
I think churches in general have to do that to kind of keep up with the world.
To evolve.
To evolve as things transpire.
Boy, so you can tell when they don't too. Yeah. My kids had gone to the grade school that they went to was a church in Snohomish County, and they had the priest there was like 81 years old. He was just a curmudgeon-y old guy. And the kids were kind of afraid of him. That's really not how it should be.
Yeah,
you know. And I'll never forget when Zoe was a baby, and I was having her baptized at the church we went to. We didn't go to this church; the kids went to school there, but we went to a different church, and it was by our house. And he said, "What's her name?" And I said, "Zoe." And he said, "Well, that's not a Catholic name. You can't baptize her with that name."
Really?
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. He's pretty old school. And I said, well, her middle name's Catherine, and her first name is Greek. It means life. He just thought she can't be baptized with that name. And I was like, well, luckily you're not baptizing her, so we don't need to worry about that, but very strict in the, way things were done. A lot of that, of course, you know how I am about rules anyway. So I always seem to have a little bit of challenge with that. But what we wanted to really talk about was the differences. And some of these are stereotypical differences or things people might be familiar with, but maybe they are stereotypes, not necessarily because they've been involved in a specific type of religion, but just what they might know, kind of like me saying, you drink coffee.
Right.
I know about the Mormon church because of you, and I've had some friends that I feel like I could ask questions to because I'm always so curious about that kind of stuff. And in school, we had religion classes all the way through high school, and we learned about non-Christian religions and things of that nature. So I'd had some exposure to it, but I always thought we were just, kind of the shit. We were like, of course, we're like the best. And I remember thinking that when I was a kid, going, that's just not like people put that in our heads, but you were just in a different place because your school was everything seemed different. Right. But I'm sure when kids are going to any other type of school, like I know there's like Jewish academies and other places that teach the religion that they have there and have regular school. It's probably very foreign to me or other people that might ask questions about it. The differences. So let's talk about differences. Again, going back to this topic being one that you don't necessarily always discuss. And so, people say, don't discuss religion or politics.
Right.
Yeah. Which we do both. And the funny thing is, Michelle and I don't always agree on everything, but we have very good opportunities to listen to each other and what we bring to the table. So with that in mind, the one thing I think would be really important to note, whether you are looking at things from a religious perspective or from a spiritual perspective, is that all of us are trying to seek the truth. And there really is no right or wrong answer. Now, some people might say that's not true. That's my perspective. There's no right or wrong answer. It's really how your path, and how you get to wherever it is that you're going from a spiritual or religious perspective. So
this is probably a good time to make that disclaimer.
Yeah.
That we are not religion or religious experts.
We're not theologians.
We are just having this conversation based on our own experiences, the differences that Julie and I see, in how we were brought up with the two different religions that we're familiar with, and where we're at today in regard to spirituality, and the differences that spirituality presents in regard to how we were brought up in a religion.
Right.
So was that a good disclaimer?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, nobody's going to think I'm a religious expert. That's for sure. But it's definitely something that I think about a lot, because we have grown up with whatever, or everybody's grown up with something probably that they've been exposed to. And I've consistently, yes, but gradually have kind of separated myself, not really intentionally, just kind of stopped doing things. It was really when my kids stopped going to school, I think, is when a lot of that started. And so then I always feel like kind of not involved. Like I went to Mass on, I'm turning into one of those Christmas and Easter people. Yeah. But I wanted to take my mom because my mom is, practicing Catholic, and I wanted her to be able to go to Mass, and it was actually nice. I always feel very comforted and comfortable, probably because it's what I know. Yeah. It's what I'm familiar with.
Same. I don't know if I've talked about it much on here, but there was about a year and a half ago, I stayed with my mom for about 6 months. And same thing. I enjoyed going to church with her, driving her to church and sitting, through the congregation and the meetings with her. It's, again, to your point, it was comfortable. It's what I grew up with. I enjoyed being there with her because I know it's what she enjoys. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
It doesn't bother me at all where I just don't want to set foot in a church. It's not like that for me.
No, me either. Yeah. It isn't really. There's the whole idea about different religions and things those are things that are kind of put in place by man over time, man, woman, whatever, persons, people over time. And so that's the difference, I think, is that, in a lot of ways, religion is something that's external, that is brought to you. So there's a lot of things already decided, and stories that are embraced, ideas that are embraced that kind of explain a lot of things. And when you look at the number of religions out there and the number of beliefs, there are so many. So many. And not all of them obviously are Christian religions. So that was kind of one of the things that I noted, is that, Christianity is obviously widespread across the world, but it's not even the most prevalent.
I think too, even within the entities themselves, people have their own way of interpreting and looking at things.
Right.
You know?
Well, and the difference being things like we were talking about the other day, if someone is interpreting, say, the Bible very fundamentally or very literally, then they're looking at the stories in there as being specific creations of whatever. And it's like, I don't look at it that way. I don't know that I ever really did. I mean, I knew the stories, I knew the fables. I always thought they were things to teach you. The stories were there to teach you, or Jesus' teachings were there to teach you, or whatever. And those are real. But I'm just talking about, a lot of the other things that you can run across that sometimes won't make sense. And what I found when I was young is that we were memorizing. We were doing a lot of memorizing of prayers. We were doing a lot of memorizing of like the services, but I never really had a good understanding of what it was that I was saying. Or I was memorizing something, but I didn't have any concept really of what the words were that were coming out of my mouth. And so as you grow, you kind of start questioning those things and asking the questions about those things. And it's nothing bad. I mean, I think more kids should do it because maybe they don't feel like they can ask the questions or question things. But I remember that it's happened with all of them, but with my oldest in particular, the conversations that we were having around this were really very deep because I really couldn't explain a lot of things to him.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what you're basing everything around is faith-based.
I was just sitting here thinking that so much of it is based on faith.
Yeah.
And it's like what you're listening to, what you're hearing, what they're teaching you.
You don't question it.
You don't question it. And in religion, there's the whole heaven and hell thing. I was telling you about that before. It's like some of it is, I have to do this or I'm going to go to hell. And not that that's like,
just generally speaking.
Just generally speaking. Yeah.
So we have the commandments, of course, Christianity has commandments. And then, there's like in different religions, they have the same types of things. But when you look at those things side by side, they're all very similar. Not the teachings necessarily or who the entity is that's worshipped, but what they're getting at.
Well, essentially how to be good people.
Exactly.
The things that we need to do in this world to be able to coexist in
our society.
Yeah, just to coexist in society, and killing your neighbor is not okay.
But what blows my mind about that is look at how many holy wars there have been. I mean, there's still stuff going on in the Middle East. There's so many holy wars, and those are all based on people trying to, have their religion be the primary religion, but it's very contradictory. So those are the things that I start to question.
Right.
Teachings, things that don't really have anything to do with the church or do with Jesus, if you will, but you're being told you have to do, or you can't do, or if you do, then you are in big deep yogurt with God.
If you do, you're in big doo-doo.
Yeah. And I think that fear factor is something that, some religions, I think, maybe speak that way more than others. I don't know. I mean, if you're again, only speaking from my own perspective, I was never in one of those hardcore Catholic churches where you were damned to hell if you did blah, blah, blah. It seemed a little bit more loving, but where I really took issue and where I think a lot of my transition kind of started happening was with some of the teachings about gay people. I started really having a tough time about that because then people are quoting the Bible and it's very literal and it's, but then it's contradictory to God loves everybody and God, you know what I mean? So that's where I was kind of struggling with it, because how can you be all loving and all knowing and damn people for something that they don't have any control over? That's how they were born. So this is in my head, the logic that I'm having.
Yeah.
So anyway, getting back to the differences, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we have identified. And I think a lot of these people will know, and they may have their own experiences surrounding some of this, but we can talk a little bit about both, religion and some of the things that are identified, and spirituality in general. So do you want to start?
the fact I think you already touched on, it essentially, though it's been over centuries and so many years, but it's established by man.
Right. And when I say that, you say established by man, it literally was established pretty much by man.
Yeah.
A man, men, whatever. Women were not really an equation in there.
Literally by men.
Yeah. But, established by a human is what they're getting at.
And I know with religion, it feels like, and I know from experience, that a lot of those reasons in the establishment is to exert control, instill morality, expectations of family, history, the culture, all of those things. Very much, I recognize those things in the Mormon religion as I experienced it. I can't speak for all Mormons, but as I experienced it, I did.
So if you went, let's just say, against some of those things, would you have humiliated your family or embarrassed your family or any of that kind of stuff?
I mean, I did. I went through a rebellious time, and I think, a turning point for me was quite early on. So I did do something that, based on the teachings in the Mormon church, I shouldn't have. And without going into detail, essentially I got caught.
Okay.
I didn't go to my bishop because I felt bad for what I did. I got caught and was called in and talked to.
Okay.
Without directly asking me, just kind of in a roundabout way, trying to get me to confess.
Oh, wow.
And then, my bishop said, well, this, that, and the other. And I was, in my mind, I was just like, wow, I didn't come to you because I felt bad and felt like I needed to confess. I'm being caught here. And now I'm being guilted and felt being made to feel so shameful for what I did. And no, as an adult now, looking back, I know that's how I felt.
Right.
But at the time, I then was urged to tell my parents that this had happened. And then, these things were outlined for me to do, to be able to come back, to be able to, be good again, I guess.
To have the shame wiped off of your...
to make it sound simple. So I look back at that. Now, I continued to, as time goes on, I stayed. It's nothing that made me leave the church at the time. I got married and raised my kids, like I said, in the church. And there were a whole lot of other factors that were challenging in that regard. But eventually I did. People would look at it as leaving the church is what I've done. So anyways, that's where I bring up instill morality and all of those things. But I think the purposes that are taught can be lost in so many of the translations. And people are human. And the way that one person is teaching it is going to be different from the way somebody else teaches it. That's why, to be able to really go within yourself and pay attention to how you're feeling about something is super important. But that's the spirituality part. We'll get to that.
Yeah. Do you feel like, just kind of a little sidebar here. Do you feel like you need to have organized religion to establish morality and values and things? No. Okay. I don't either. Just, it's what's taught. I mean, it's really part of that, regardless of what religion you're in. It's, again, going back to being a good person and making moral decisions and all that kind of stuff.
Now, do I think it was helpful in regard to the kind of person that I turned out to be? Yes.
Yeah.
I think that going to church and having a lot of those things in my life were contributory to the kind of person that I am.
Makes sense.
Does that make sense?
And you really don't know it any other way. I don't know it any other way either.
Yeah.
I mean, structure's good. Structure's not a bad thing.
Right.
And a lot of people thrive with structure. I did, I think, to some degree, not all degrees, but to some degree, because it gives you a framework, from which to work. But then if you don't necessarily understand or agree with it, I don't necessarily think that there were a lot of avenues to really go down for that.
Yeah.
So in regard to spirituality, you were saying that, religion is established by human beings, but spirituality is really something that is a manifestation of his nature, meaning God's nature, in you. So it is how you recognize your relationship with God, how you grow that relationship with God, not by a set of rules. So that, I think, would be a good way to explain the differences between those. Spirituality, too, would be something that's probably more private and personal to someone. But there's ultimately a belief in a higher power, whether that higher power, whatever that higher power is.
Yeah.
And so in Christianity, it's Jesus, and, in Hindu, it's one thing, and Taoism is it's different in every religion out there, but the same basic premise kind of still stands. So religion is also, if you were looking at the structure of it, would you say for the most part, it's something that's shared within a group or a community? It's not something that you do on your own.
Right.
So large congregations in some cases.
I just had this thought as you said that. In some ways, wish there were times in my life I wish I could go to that church and just get what I needed and not feel like I had to be part of the bigger community.
Right.
I think there's in some ways this pressure that can be felt, and you have to, if you're going to go be a part of, then there's a lot of expectations sometimes, I think, that are felt in things that you have to contribute or do.
In order to be a part of the community.
In order to be a part of the community. Now, maybe eventually you want to be a part of that community, but I think in church or an organized religion, sometimes it's hard to just be able to go and maybe keep to yourself and do what you want while you're there and get what you need while you're there and then leave. Maybe I'm just basing that on the experiences I've had.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
In the church that I grew up in. I don't know.
Well, I had said this when we were talking, I don't know, a different podcast, a different episode where, being raised Catholic and having gone to church on a regular basis and to school and all of that, I felt like when I was older and looking back on it, I was kind of going through the motions. Like, again, going back to the not necessarily absorbing the things that I was saying or doing. I knew that the fundamental belief was to be a good person. The fundamental belief is, Jesus Christ is your savior, all that kind of stuff. But I never really felt connected. So, which kind of in some respects makes me feel kind of bad. I don't know why, except that I tried, but I don't necessarily think it was the avenue to which I was going to be able to really feel the presence of, the Lord in my life. It just didn't work for me that well.
I can't say that there weren't times that I felt that way in certain aspects of the Mormon religion when I was active and regularly participating. There were moments where I felt closeness to God like that. But a lot of the same, a lot of it was just this repetitive, habitual practice that I grew up with, that I continue to do because it's what I was supposed to do. And it's what my family did. It's what I needed to do in my own family, but not because I felt this burning desire that it's what was right and the right thing to do. It's just because it's what I had always done.
Well, exactly. And that's where I was saying when my kids got a little older, they started questioning a lot of these things. More scientific views on things. And so what I've come to learn is that generationally, I think there were a lot of times when you go back through the decades, like say this last century, people just take things at face value. And it's what their parents were taught. It's what their grandparents were taught, et cetera. So it's something that's carried down and they don't ask. And so now when you're starting to see people in this day and age, the generations that are out there, they're asking a lot of the questions. It's not like they don't believe. They're just really trying to understand where the information came from and how. And honestly, it's like, I'm not a Bible reader per se. I obviously know some Bible passages, but for the most part, I'm not really a Bible reader. So I wouldn't even be able to quote a passage or something. Well, they said this in the book of Matthew or, whatever. I never did that. But what I had gone back to say is that, this is all part of the process when you are, I mean, it was like, I didn't really have a good answer. I don't feel like I had the best answer. And the questions that were being asked of me were questions about belief and proof. And I remember the one in particular, when the oldest one, when he was pushing back on getting confirmed, was we were talking about the apostles and the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and and just the apostles in general. He was like, how do you know all these guys just didn't get drunk and sit around and write these books? And I'm kind of looking at him going, well, that's not really probably how it happened, but I'm sure they all sat around and had wine, I'm sure they probably did. They weren't all written at the same time. And then you've got, the Old Testament is a whole nother thing, which is completely different. And anyway,
yeah.
So, and that's where a lot of things are based on those fundamental teachings and are very literal.
Yeah.
And I have a really hard time with the literal aspect of things because I don't think a lot of that stuff makes sense to me anyway.
Yeah.
Or I'm kind of like, really, when you really step back and think about it, it's like there's millions and millions of people out there that believe in something that they've never seen, that's thousands of years old, that they're being told by these books that people wrote. And not even all the books are in there. The Mary Magdalene's book's not even in there. Why is that? I just think sometimes there's more questions than answers. And so that's where the faith part comes in. But I need answers in order to feel like it makes sense to me. And I think that you're starting to see more where people, instead of just taking it at face value, they're asking more questions. And that's where the topic of spirituality comes in, because they don't really need organized religion telling them so much as exuding that spirituality in a way that makes sense to them. I don't know. That's what I see anyway.
Yeah.
So the other thing too, we were talking about the religion. So it being structured, having a lot of rules. There is a lot of fear. And again, it depends on how these things are shared with the communities and populations. It's different in every religion. But I think there is an undercurrent maybe of fear sometimes that's woven into these things. So people will know, gosh, this is not a good thing. This is a bad thing, or this is an evil thing. I need to stay away from this because I won't go to heaven if I behave that way, or if I do a bad thing or whatever. So there's just that little thing in the back of their heads that helps them make decisions, Things like divine judgment, God's wrath, eternal punishment. Like I think I'd mentioned to you, I went to we were talking about this the other day, went to a funeral, and it was a Catholic funeral. It was a little different than normal because usually there's a mass and all this, but I think they may have had that before. And the priest was talking about this very thing. And he was saying how, everybody's, comes to this world and, you make good decisions and some people make bad decisions. And so when they leave this earth, they don't just automatically go to heaven. I mean, they're just kind of sitting out there waiting for the decision or their life's review, but to determine which direction they're going. And I'm like, damn, this is our funeral. Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting way to approach.
That is interesting.
But those are the teachings, So I think this woman was going to heaven for sure.
Yeah.
Especially since she put up with one of my dear friends. No. His mom. But anyway, I was paying attention because I was just like, wow, I had never heard a priest really talk that way, especially at a funeral. I'd never really heard that, but not the fire and brimstone kind of thing you hear from a lot more like fundamentalist kind of Christian churches, things like that. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of Catholic churches out there that do it too. I just haven't been around a lot of them. But
a lot of ritualistic things too. In religion, organized religion. I know in the Mormon church there was anyways.
Oh,
I think Catholics too.
Tons. And I don't know what all of them really mean. I just did them all, Just you kneel, you stand up, you kneel again, you stand up, you sit down, fight. It's always
that's kind of everything with Catholic, right? It's not just church. It's like if you go to a funeral, it's going to be like that. If you go to a wedding, it's going to be like that. Yeah.
Little side note: when I was a kid, I got teased because my last name was Neil. The kids would call me Julie Genuflect. at church. Anyway, just a little funny there, a little side note. So a religion, again, going back to being faith-based.
It doesn't require experience, I guess, to validate what they're saying.
Right. So unconditional acceptance, though, of the religious teachings. And I've always thought that meant all of the religious teachings, right? So when there were, well, I guess that's truly what it means. If that doesn't resonate with me at all, and that's where I started to see, it's like, the whole, like the abortion issue, of course, comes up, or the same-sex marriage. Those are the things that are modern day issues that we're experiencing and running into now that, the church, I think all of them, but, take somewhat of a stand on. So if you're violating that, then you're sinning. And if you're the way the church is going, so like premarital sex, it's like, do you tell them to abstain? I mean, does that really make sense? I mean, it makes sense, but is it really reasonable or viable to think of someone nowadays waiting until they're married to have sex?
Why is it different now than it would have been before?
I think before they just snuck around a lot and did it anyway. Yeah. Now it's maybe more of a discussion. Like you see, like with parents and kids, maybe it's more of a discussion.
Right. It's more out in the open.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And
definitely.
So as a parent, it's like, a parent to a 17, 18-year-old kid, are you going to not have a conversation with them about this because you're Catholic or whatever religion you are, because they just are not supposed to, so you just don't talk about it?
Yeah.
Or is it something you talk about with the reality that they're 17, 18-year-old, maybe they're a boy, who knows, a girl, boy, whatever.
Yeah.
And you don't have a conversation about it. So what happens next? Because they are out in the world, they're dating, they are with their friends. I mean, it's not realistic in my mind to think that you just leave it at, it's against our religion. You can't do that. I just think there needs to be more conversation around
very
things.
Black and white.
Yeah. And again, that's the way it's always been. That's always been the way it is. I think things need to evolve and change with structured religion in order to have conversations so people understand, kids in particular will understand what it is that their faith is all about. And again, not to say that those things weren't explained to some degree. I just may not have been listening completely. I'm just going to put that little disclaimer out there.
No shit.
Yeah. I think I was on restriction or something. So we were talking about the basic principles of religion.
So we've already looked at some of the commonalities between the two, but can the religion aspect has kind of tired my brain. Can we move on to the spirituality of things?
Sure.
There's so much. I mean, truly, when you look at these things, or when we're talking about all of these things, and there's still so many things in my mind that I want to say.
Yeah, it's definitely not a 1 hour podcast topic, but
it really is.
It gives us a little precursor and maybe a different thought process. And everything, audience, when we're talking through these things, it is not to get you to think one way or another. It's to give you information so you can have a better understanding of where you stand in this world.
Our perspectives, just totally our perspectives on things and what we have come to learn through our own experiences. For me, as I grew older, still going to church every Sunday and trying to do what I thought was the right thing for myself and my family, and yet completely drinking coffee the entire time. And that was something that I wasn't supposed to be doing, but I did it anyway.
Did you feel guilty?
No.
Okay.
I didn't.
Were you saying you were going to have your mom visit one time and you're going to hide the coffee pot?
I did that all the time.
Oh.
So I guess maybe I did feel guilty, but in a different kind of a way. Personally, did I feel guilty for drinking coffee? No. And no, I didn't. But when my parents, here I am at 35 and 40 years old. And yes, when my parents would come to visit, I would put the coffee pot under the cupboard and hide all the things because I didn't want them to know that I drank coffee, right?
So what would they have done?
I don't know. But eventually I left the coffee pot out.
Okay. I hope so. Probably by the time we were like 45.
Yeah, no, it was not long after I got divorced and I was living on my own and I had the coffee pot out. I love my coffee. Coffee pot was out. Parents were coming to visit. And in my mind, it was kind of this moment. I was like, I'm not going to put it away.
I'm an independent woman.
This is who I am.
Yeah.
I drink coffee. I'm not going to put it away. And I didn't put it away.
And they probably didn't care.
Or
notice.
What are they going to, but that's how much those things, as they're taught and you think they're bad and you're not supposed to do, well, here I'm doing them anyways. Mm-hmm. But the guilt and the shame, especially within the family, so many things are. And so you just want everything to seem like it's all cool. Just like me and my husband and with my family. Mm-hmm. Parents would come and visit. The facade was on. Mm-hmm. I wanted them to think that everything was cool and everything was fine.
Living the lie.
And it wasn't fine.
Right.
So I think things like that sometimes, and it's not just the religion that does that. There's a whole lot of deeper seated things.
Agreed.
But spirituality, on the other hand, is something so private, like you said. It's mm-hmm. private and personal, and how you come to know that and understand it and feel it is going to be different for everybody. Mm-hmm. And yet the same, just like God, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think it's, like I said, it's going to be a different experience for everybody. But because spirituality is something that I feel unfolds and it's something that you develop and it's not forced, mm-hmm. it's going to be something that you're able to reflect on and really do soul searching things and find answers to. And it's not just because it's what is convenient and comfortable for you. I don't think it's part of who you are. And if you really deep down listen to the things that are being said to you, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Some people will call that the Holy Spirit that's doing that. It's the higher power, whatever it is, but your intuition, mm-hmm. Whatever that is, we all have it. So when you really pay attention to it, I think it's that you find more of an inner peace. Even if you're in religion and you're doing that, you're going to find more of an inner peace. And you might be able to, which is what I did. I was listening to myself, my intuition, that inner voice, that still small voice, if you want to call it whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And if you're true to that, you'll live your life accordingly.
Right. I do think that there's
whatever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a definite need for, again, everything starts at that fundamental level when kids are learning along the way. And so if they don't have a role model to teach them, it does, and I'm not talking religion here, I'm just talking mm-hmm. about being a good human.
The golden rule.
Yeah, the golden rule, which every religion's based on, mm-hmm. do unto others as you would want them to do unto you.
Yep.
So if you follow that rule and you're learning about like your morals and the values that you possess or your family possesses, and then you determine if those things are what you want to carry mm-hmm. on, you make decisions that are going to be good decisions, not decisions that are self-serving all the time, that kind of stuff. Then I think you're in really good shape. But I knew kids, growing up that didn't have any religion or anything in their family. And I remember feeling bad for them.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't have a good beacon mm-hmm. to follow.
A base.
Yeah, and maybe they did, and I just didn't see it. Mm-hmm. Maybe their parents had those conversations and stuff with them. I didn't have those conversations really with my folks. I think I learned a lot of that. Well, the punitive stuff, I would say I probably learned a little bit more at home, but I learned a lot of the fundamental teachings and things probably through church, mm-hmm. through the church that I was in.
Yeah.
And of course, then they're modeled by my mom and obviously my dad. They were very righteous people. Mm-hmm. They were stand-up people and took good care of their family, and they didn't screw people over. They were good people.
Yeah.
My mom's still here.
Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah.
With my family, my parents, the church, no disregard or mm-hmm. disrespect for the Mormon church at all. No. Because I know it's the people within the church that can really make things, be the opposite experience of what you're hoping for.
Right.
Not the church itself.
I have a lot of issues with some of the contradictions that I see, or it's like you're supposed to be loving and people that are in the church are supposed to be loving and accepting, but they're still doing the same things that, they would do if they weren't at a church.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. I've seen it both ways. that structure is too much for me. I get that. It's too much for me. And I've recognized that my children are really kind of similar to that. But I know that they will want some sort of structure when they have children. So who knows what they'll end up doing, at that point in time. So when we're talking about spirituality, do you think that spirituality does encompass a belief in God all the time?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I don't think it, not necessarily, because I think for a lot of people, yes, it does. For me, it does, but I don't think it does for everybody. I think there's that higher power that is spoken to, referred to when it comes to spirituality. And that's going to be different for everybody. I think for most and for a lot, it's God or Buddha or whatever the religion might be.
Right. Their higher power.
Yeah.
I think when you say God, it's like God is kind of all encompassing.
All encompassing. Yeah.
And that's where when we were talking the other day, we were talking about how religions, specifically whatever they are, different religions, non-Christian, Christian religions, whatever, they think that their method of worship is the only method that is going to get you to heaven.
Yeah.
So what happens to all the other people? That's what I want to know. It's kind of like, if God's an all-loving God. See, these are the things that kind of go back and forth in my head.
And I used to tell myself when I was in the Mormon church, I used to say to myself, well, what have I got to lose? Like, if I'm doing all this stuff and it's just extra credit and it's all for naught, if it's not true, well, it's not going to hurt me by doing it all anyways, right? But that is not the reason to be doing that.
I know.
So, yeah.
With religion, we're following a set of external rules, where with spirituality, it's more internal. So it's more following the rules that you set for yourself. And some of those fundamentals, don't necessarily correspond with rules per se, like you would see in a traditional organized religion. I don't know specifics. I don't necessarily have a specific, but like, for example, oh yes, I do. Okay. So let's say in an organized religion, you don't go to church on Sunday, and it's noticed that you don't go to church, and you're kind of penalized or you're shunned or whatever that you don't go to church. So with spirituality, you can go to the beach and have church. You can go to yoga and have church,
right?
Because it's really all about kind of inward thinking as opposed to pushing outward. Would you agree with that?
The meditation aspect of things. That's why I think now spirituality has really gotten to be so much more widely recognized as a result of yoga and meditation and a lot of those kinds of things that people has brought that inner peace and that inner self-awareness, and has brought spirituality, I think, to the forefront for so many people.
Well, they have a kind of maybe a name for it, now, where you could say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. People say I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. Well, what does that mean exactly? That, in my mind, means that I don't follow the doctrine of a specific religious entity. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
But I still believe in God. I still believe in the tenets of being a good person. Would you say that has to do with the Bible itself when you say that? Because and I'm only asking because it made me think of, for myself, and this has been more recent, but I've been listening to a church service. Oh, yeah.
On Sundays. Okay. Yeah. And I quite enjoy it. And it gives me a lot of bases of things that are helpful for me in my life.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's so for me, that's church.
Yeah.
And for the folks that are there in person, it really is church. So I guess it's an aspect. I mean, it is church.
Yeah. So my favorite part has always been the homily in Catholic Church and sermon in other churches. I don't know what they call it in non-Christian churches, but because it's usually some sort of story or some sort of message that gets your brain working.
Yeah.
And gets you thinking about things in a different way. Usually it's tied back to whatever the reading was that was taking place, the Old Testament or New Testament readings, depending what they do it on. But I've always enjoyed that part of it because they can kind of bring it to modern day life. And apply it to things that are in our current day and age.
Yeah.
And how it would resonate with us today. That I really have appreciated. So, but those are Bible readings,
right?
And I'm not opposed to the Bible at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not opposed to the Bible. My opposition really, I wouldn't even say opposition. It's like my hesitation really comes from things being construed very fundamentally, very literally.
Yeah.
That's just me. I mean, I know there are a lot of religions that are out there like that. They literally will quote the Bible for every reason that they can, but there's so many different interpretations of these different passages that are in the Bible.
Well, and I guess the important part that I'm thinking about with that, like for me, listening to that service every Sunday, and giving me things to think about, things to apply in my own life. It's church, but taking the time to do whatever it is that you're going to do, I think is important. Even the spirituality aspect of things, because it's like filling your tank, I guess.
Yeah.
If it's like the love topic that we did, it's filling your love tank. This is filling your spiritual tank.
Right.
Really. And I think, there are things that we need to be intentional about, whether it's like me listening to a service or doing the meditation. Some people, as far as meditation, other people are praying, and that's a prayer. I mean, really, meditation is a spiritual. I suppose the spiritual aspect within yourself of a prayer. It's like a something you're speaking and trying to manifest within yourself. A prayer is calling upon the higher power to do that. That's where faith comes in, I think, in regard to that. Depending on what the prayer is, it's an outreach for that higher power and assistance with that.
It's going outside of you versus inside of you. Yeah.
But the intention of the reflection, the intention of internalizing, the intention of, that spirituality or that message and the application of it in your life, I think is what's really going to make a difference if you are seeking that.
Exactly. I think that's
if you are seeking that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely feel like if you don't have some understanding of what your beliefs are or lack of beliefs, some people are, I've never really understood like an atheist perspective per se. It's very curious to me, but let's just go back to what I was saying before. If you don't have that kind of, if it's really muddy or gray or whatever, you feel lost. At least I have.
Yeah.
I've felt that way before. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Or you're like, this is not working for me. I don't know if I need to go to church, or I don't know if I need to go to the lake or sit. I just don't know. But I know I need to do something because I feel really lost. And so I've decided, not even really realizing that's what I'm deciding to do, is I've gone external. But I do remember, after Zachary passed away, that I was literally so lost, right? Yeah. And there's the priest that married us, Father Doug, who is an amazing man. I love that man. He was a teacher at our high school. And I just found myself showing up at his office, showing up at the school and where his office was, and just showing up at his door. Like I needed something from him, but it wasn't necessarily him being a priest. It was the kind of person he was, or what he represented, or what I knew he could give me, like a big, just make me feel more safe or something. I don't know how to describe it, but he was the person that I chose at that time to go seek that out from. And there wasn't anybody else that I really wanted to seek that out from. It was more like I'd gone to counseling. That just really wasn't helping me.
I think God probably directed you that way.
You're probably right.
Yeah.
Probably did. Yeah. So anyway, kind of an interesting thing, but that's again, where my comfort level was, what I knew. With spirituality, I don't think, at least I can speak for myself, I don't dismiss the fact that there is faith out there, that people are faith-based. I think that there's a lot of things you have to have faith about, but there's a balance I'm finding where I don't want to be a lemming and just follow the herd, follow the crowd, whatever. I want to have a better understanding of what it is that I'm putting my whole heart into. And so if I don't understand it, I just kind of leave it. I think that's the difference. And so when I go back to spirituality, it's something that is more innate, and it's easier for me to, there's no one holding me accountable but myself,
right,
to what I'm doing or to what I'm learning or to what I'm anything that's going on in my life. So there's nobody else to hold accountable but me, then I'm the one that's accountable.
I think part of that, like I was saying before, the intention, if you're not understanding it and you're not wanting to blindly follow based on faith and you're needing answers, I think if you're wanting something to be more clear, you need to search out what it is you're looking for. Right. You need to dive deep in whatever aspect that might be to see if you can get those answers. Right. I think just like the story you just told, I think God was directing you to that priest, and without you even knowing, you went. But I think that was random. But in situations like that, if you see somebody else doing something and you're questioning or you're wanting to, but you don't really know why, you need to dive in and try to find out what those answers are. Whether it is a long drive in the car in a beautiful highway or going on a hike in nature, sitting out in nature and just closing your eyes and praying, meditating, whatever it might be about those things that you're wanting answers to.
So what are some of the signs that you might run across? Like if you're running across people that you think you're just getting to know, for example, what would be some of the signs that you're meeting a really spiritual person?
Just the feeling you get when you're around somebody. I think that's always telling. I'm pretty good about noticing stuff like that. Yeah. The feeling you get after spending time around somebody. Yeah. I think a lot of times that comes to fruition pretty quickly. Yeah. Or it can.
And you feel like you can feel kind of a connection maybe with that person because you can tell that maybe they're deep thinkers, deeper thinkers.
Definitely.
I've seen where people who are very spiritual, they really show a lot of empathy and compassion towards others. Again, not saying that people that are religious don't, they do too. But it's just one of the characteristics that I have noticed.
I think they're very thoughtful too.
Yeah.
I think spiritual people are thoughtful. Like you said, they're empathic. I think they're very intuitive. It's almost like they're able to recognize needs in people before people even recognize them themselves, if that makes sense.
You're good at reading. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like Jen, is it like Jennifer? Yeah. Our friend Jennifer, the medium, she's very in tune with what's happening. And that's part of just what the level of consciousness probably that she has. Yeah. There are actually 3 different types of spirituality, and I'm just going to lay these out here so you know. So spiritual individualism is something that's centered on the within. So again, more about internalizing, kind of reading yourself, seeking your answers, from within. Collectivism, spiritual collectivism, is centered on institutions of religion. So you can still be spiritual, obviously, and be religious, but they don't necessarily always go together, because I can think of plenty of people that I've known over the years that are extremely religious, and it's like punitive kind of stuff, kind of like you feel like you're going to get in trouble all the time.
Right.
But they're not spiritual. They don't strike me as spiritual at all. It's really more like following the rules, right? Kind of a thing.
Right.
And then spiritual dialogue is something where it's centered on prayer and meditation, things like we were talking about before, and just takes us beyond maybe what our kind of everyday experiences are. So we're paying more attention to what's going on.
I like that.
Yeah, I do
actually.
too. Yeah. Yeah. The spiritual dialogue, it's like what you're saying to yourself, how you're interpreting things.
Manifestations.
Manifestations, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about why we think maybe people have moved away from organized religion, or, and we have some statistics here we'll share in a little bit, but there is a definite decline in organized religion in the world today, thousands and thousands and thousands of years since some of these religions have been developed or have been identified. But why do you think some of the people today are moving away from things?
Because of judgment.
Okay.
They can tend to be judgmental. And again, it's the people in the church.
Right.
That will do that, unfortunately. So I can remember feeling that way a lot.
Really?
Weirdly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Being judged. I felt judged. And maybe those were due to my own insecurities. Could be.
Could have been, but...
And I think judgments and hypocritical thinking within organized religions.
So like do as I say, not as I do?
Yeah. I mean, yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's where I've struggled with that a little bit too, because I really started thinking through it. And when I was thinking about religion in general, it is very external, right? Mm-hmm. So we're talking about human beings who have established the hierarchy and the rules and the different tenets of a religion and what they mean. It hasn't been decided by God. And that's where I kind of struggle with some of that.
But that's not what people within the religion think.
They don't ask. They don't necessarily question a lot of those things.
But yeah, they're called of God. And this is how it is because it's how God wants it to be.
But how do we know that? And I guess
that's where the faith comes in.
Right. Well, and some of these people are like, they're divine individuals, right?
Yeah. I just put that out there because the people within those religions, we say it was people that did it. People did do it, but they were called of God.
Yeah. They were called by God to do it.
Yeah.
Per they're the ones that told us that.
Yes. Yes, that is correct.
So
I know. I'm just pointing it out.
No, I know. And I feel like I'm going to get
it's a giant circle
struck down by lightning for even saying these things. But it's kind of, maybe I'm just looking at it too plain and basic, but it's like we're talking about human beings making these judgments, making these decisions, making the determination really on who goes to heaven and hell based on if you follow these things or not. So so that has definitely been an issue. The other thing that I have really struggled with more as I've gotten older is that I've noticed how women are treated differently in religion.
Well, that's probably part of why the decline. I know when you were asking this, some of the things. And so judgments or hypocritical, the way women are treated sometimes in some of the more...
Well, some of the religions are very severe, and women are really not treated like people. Again, very severe religions, but they're not allowed to speak. Their husbands dictate and rule everything that they do. They're not allowed to wear makeup. They're not allowed to go to school. It's like they're not treated like equal human beings. And I have a really, really hard time with that. So I know, again, that is the way religions have been developed over time. And I feel like there's a lot more evolution in that as things have changed, at least with, still women aren't priests. Women, in the Catholic Church, women are not priests. They may be Eucharistic ministers, or they may be, I can't remember what the other title is, where they're not ordained, but they can do some of the things that a priest can do, like give communion, obviously, things like that. But maybe not hear confession. But anyway, so I feel like it's gotten a little bit better, but women are definitely...
Women be confessing to each other all the time anyway.
We be confessing to each other all the time. Well, and remember, so we had a conversation like a week... this is probably a whole nother rabbit hole topic, but where we were talking about... a lot of it's religious based, but... the man being the head of the household and the woman having to submit to the man.
That S word, man.
And I was like, damn, I hate that word. It's like, it's not to
Submissive.
say, yeah, it's not to say that I, if I was in a relationship like that I wouldn't work with my husband and we would make, I just look at it like we'd make decisions together. We would.
Of course. And you do.
It wouldn't be some guy making a decision for me.
I just think, unfortunately, that word has a bad rap.
Yeah. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
I think.
I mean, I have no problem really with a guy being the head of the household. Someone's got to be, right? But we all know the household doesn't run without us. So.
Women are the neck that turn the head. Literally.
Literally, yeah. You're so naughty. You're going to hell. Oh my goodness. Okay, so what are some of these other ones? So women's role. So that one I've really struggled with. And again, as I mentioned in other religions, I actually watched this TED Talk the other day of this woman who's Muslim, and she really shared some great things about how she looked at her religion and what progress needed to be made in regard to the view of women and their contributions and everything. So it's not like she's not going to be Muslim. She's a very proud Muslim woman, but she sees the issues with some of the teachings and some of the doctrines that they have, which alleviate women's rights really as people. So, she's working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Also, like church scandals and things, traumatic events that have sparked a crisis of faith. I mean,
Plenty of those.
Yeah.
Plenty of those.
Plenty. But, again, I'm sorry, everybody. I was raised Catholic, so that's what I know. But let's talk about, pedophile priests.
Right.
How come this is where I go back to, yes, they may be a divine source, but they're human beings. They were raised as kids. They grew up. They're human beings. And you're saying that they can't have sex and they're not supposed to masturbate. So they're human beings. Yeah. And they end up in these very precarious situations where they become pedophiles or they don't follow the same rules all the time. Again, very general. I'm saying this very generally because there's a lot of priests out there that are amazing. But when you think about how things have been lined up over time, we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure. Right. I mean, the priest population is declining very rapidly, and this is probably a lot of the reason why, is that they're married to God. Okay, love you, God, but God can't give them a hug. Anyway, very, very maybe crass way of saying it, but that's kind of my thought.
Well, and again, like anything in so many of those types of situations, there's so much more information now for people out there. And it's talked about so much more among children and teenagers, and that these things should not be happening. And
they were hidden.
Right.
And people were paid off. Right. And these priests were moved to other congregations where there's more children.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They weren't held accountable. So it was all kind of handled. Anyway, I have a really hard time with all that. So another thing is, and I think this is kind of how we were, but we were raised with religious backgrounds, and the religion hasn't necessarily always brought answers to us that we've asked.
Right.
And I think my kids, your kids too, to some degree, it's like they're a different generation coming up where they're asking more questions, and they're doing that at the same time that we're adults, and we're kind of going, well, they kind of have a good point, you know?
Like your oldest, my oldest did the same thing.
Yeah.
A lot of questions about a lot of the church history in the Mormon church. And I didn't have the answers. Well, because I didn't pay attention to any of that. And it's like all hidden and it's not talked about. Right. And so then he started bringing all these things up, and I'm like, I don't know.
You probably know more than I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and again, I didn't have a lot of those answers either. But I felt like the questions were really valid. And it's really something that I've noticed in my kids anyway, is that they have a much more scientific view on things.
Well, I think too, if you take the stereotypes and the superstition out of religion and provide more logic.
Yes.
Right. That's where the spirituality comes to fruition.
Right.
And it is making sense, and it's within you.
But I think if there's questions, at least people are feeling more comfortable asking nowadays.
Yeah.
Maybe there's just more avenues for people
I like
to
how we
ask.
say nowadays all the time.
Nowadays.
Makes us sound so old. Nowadays.
Well, we're very youthful.
Old people.
Youthful old people. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So generations, today want logic and proof. So yeah, those are some of the main reasons. I think for me, a lot of it has been the rules and just a lot of contradictions to things. And so then you step back and go, there's like super religious, like I'm speaking Catholics right now, but super fundamental religious Catholics, right? And then there's the other ones that I know. The ones that like to go out on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, those are called Jack Mormons.
Jack Mormons?
In the Mormon church, yeah. Jack Mormons.
Oh, I've never heard that.
Yeah, that's a term.
We're just called
Used to be anyways.
Cat lickers. No, one of my neighbor's grandpas when we were growing up called us cat lickers.
Cat lickers? Catholics.
Cat lickers, yeah. I don't know why. He was a sweet old man.
Jack Mormons and Cat lickers.
Yeah, but it's like, the Catholics I know, it's like the ones that I hung out with and have spent more time with are more like me, I would say. But they're definitely faith-based people.
Did you go to confession much?
I did in school.
Like in high school?
All
throughout school. Is it part of the curriculum?
No, no. You went to mass every week, and then there was confession every week too, but not until after you were baptized.
Yeah,
and so that would have been like second grade, kind of a thing.
Just curious.
And then there's a whole prayer that you say. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been so long since my last confession. Blah 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 blah. You memorize that. I still know it.
Yeah.
And these are my sins. And then you confess your sins, and the priest is sitting you're in a box.
Yeah, I've seen it on movies. I've seen it like...
It's not really like that so much anymore. I think it's a lot more is done face to face. So like when we were confirmed, I just sat in a pew in the church with the priest. We didn't sit like behind a closed door or anything like that. So I think it's definitely changed a lot since we were kids. One of the thoughts that when I was listening to, I think it was one of these TED Talks that I was listening to, which made sense to me, I'll just kind of share this with you, is that organized structured religions in some respects remove God from the equation. You confess your sins to a clergy member, go to churches, these big churches, to worship. You're told what to pray or what prayers to say, memorize the prayers, and when to say them. And all of those factors kind of remove God. They did for me. That's why this resonated with so much, because I had all those prayers memorized. I knew everything. I knew the mass. I knew what happens next.
So they don't remove God. They remove you from God.
Well,
because you're so focused on the tasks.
The tasks, yeah.
There's all these tasks.
Of what you're supposed to do to get there. And not necessarily what happens, or how to get there, like truly get there.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why I struggled with that when I was a kid or a young adult. I don't know. But I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to share.
Yeah.
Do you know what the oldest religion is?
I don't.
It's actually Hinduism.
Really?
Yeah. Hinduism is the third largest religion and is like 15 to 16% right now of the world's population.
Wow.
And there are so many different things about Hinduism that are just really super interesting. I actually know some people, and I ask, of course, a lot of questions, and they'll be very happy to share them with me. Yeah. Because I'm curious about it. But that's the largest religion. What country do you think is the highest percentage of atheists or people who don't believe in God at all?
That's kind of an interesting question.
I know.
I don't even know.
Well, I actually had heard about this before, and I was looking it up, and it was right. It's Sweden.
Really?
Yeah. They are very progressive in Sweden about a lot of different things.
I'm Swedish.
Well, maybe that
explains a lot.
I'm a quarter. No, I don't really identify as Swedish. But yeah, no, it's Sweden.
What percentage of us is religious in the U.S.? Did you look that up? Yeah,
I did. And I actually kind of was curious to see if it had increased or decreased. And it appears that it's fallen to just right around that 47% mark within a couple of years ago. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, no, I just like, what percent is religious in the U.S.? So does that mean they go to church?
They're yes, religious.
Okay, so church-going religious people.
Right.
Okay. That's what I was...
Is around that 47% mark within the last couple of years.
That is lower than I would think.
It's the lowest. I don't know what the percentage was that it had dropped from, but they've started asking this question like 80 years ago. And this is the lowest it's been.
I feel like people got comfortable like churching from home during the pandemic.
Oh yeah. Well, this poll was taken in 21, which we were in the heat of the pandemic at that point.
Okay.
But it's people that, basically they go to church, they're religious people.
Yeah.
So, and I would say predominantly that ends up being a lot in the South, believe it or not. A lot of them.
Bible Belt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is Christianity growing or declining in the U.S., do you think? We were just speaking about religion in the U.S. before, but this is specifically Christianity.
I would have to say it is growing.
Okay. And why would you say that?
Just because, like we've been talking about, spirituality, and doesn't necessarily mean that it's people going to church, but Christianity, even the higher power of spirituality, I think it has become, I don't know, bigger and more widespread. I think people are leaning on that more, in light of the turmoil of the world, really. Yeah. So I don't know if that's true. That's just my own.
Well, I was kind of surprised to learn that it's actually on the decline.
Christianity
in general would be on the decline in the U.S. So in 2016, it was at 73.7%. And now going back to 2022, 64%. Other religions are probably increasing their membership, in the U.S. as well. So maybe people are transitioning or...
Yeah. I see how... I can see that. Other religions and increased membership, and I think people are searching for things. That could be why I think back in the day, it was just all about Christianity.
That's all we were exposed to.
That's what I mean. I don't think, when you think about in the schools and, all of those faith-based Bible Belt,
right,
church-going people, it's just like that's what everybody did. They, went to school all week, went to work all week, went to church on Sunday, and that's,
did it all over again.
Yeah.
Well, now,
baseball and apple pie.
Well, the religion is, there's that separation between church and state. And so you've got schools who are changing how they say the Pledge of Allegiance even, or, you can't have anything that's faith-based, even Halloween. Something that's more of a pagan holiday. In schools, they have to have harvest festivals and things like, because there's so many different religions that are represented.
Yeah.
And some kids they're not involved in any of those things. So it really doesn't make any sense.
Right.
For them. And that's not fair because they're a part of the same community. So
does everything have to be fair? Don't even get me started. That's a whole other topic.
Okay. We'll talk about that one another time. Damn it.
I'm just kidding.
So here's the big question of the hour. The final question maybe we'll have today. Can you go to heaven without being religious?
Yes.
Okay. I would agree with you.
No hesitation there.
So I would say in any religion, God's mercy really would have no limits. So if you have a good heart and you're sincere and you are genuinely trying to be a good person, there's absolutely no reason in my mind why you would not be in God's favor. And if God is an all-loving God, I go back to that whole thing, then who does he hate people?
No.
Okay, well, there you go.
No.
So then that goes back to the question we had earlier. What about Hitler?
I can't.
I know, I can't either.
I can't even go there.
Because I know that's a whole nother topic, but I have to ask myself.
Yeah.
Because he's obviously was insane.
He was human. He was also human.
Yeah. But I doubt he had a contrite heart.
Right.
I doubt he was worried about any of that stuff. So that would put him in a place where maybe he would be in judgment. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think, when we're talking about all of this stuff, agnostic, atheist, Christian, non-Christian, spiritual,
Mormons, Catholic.
Those damn Mormons.
Christians.
Damn Mormons have all those kids. Those Catholics, they have all those kids
I know.
populating our earth.
There's a lot of similarities between the Catholic and the Mormon Church.
I know.
As far as,
There's a lot of things about the Mormon Church, actually, that not a lot, but there's things that I think are really cool. And a lot of it has more to do with the family aspect of things.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of the families are close. And that is definitely something that's, I think, missing in our world today.
For sure.
So it's a priority. It's placed as a priority, but it's also, how those parents were raised and, that sort of thing. So can you take that, which you did with your kids, and still have a tight family and still have, all the things that you have, but not have to base it around religion.
Right.
There's ways to do that too. I just don't know that everybody really thinks about it.
Yeah.
Speaking from our own, it's like we were going 90 million miles an hour. We never really we didn't make it a priority. And, I'm divorced. So that tells you something. Anyway. So people out there, we appreciate you listening to our banter and discussion on religion and spirituality. And where we sit in this world today. Maybe we'll talk to you again on this in a couple seasons, and maybe we'll have a different idea.
Yeah.
I'll start being Mormon and Michelle will be Catholic.
Oh, no.
Oh, not happening.
Nope. I'm just going to keep watching my service on Sundays.
Yeah. And keep being a good human.
That's right.
So I guess we're going to go now.
Yeah. With that,
peace be with you.
Good luck and keep doing what you do, whether it's praying in the morning on your knees, saying it while you're in the car, meditating during a yoga session, or going to church on Sundays. Do whatever you feel you need to do to bring forth the spirituality within yourself, and
don't judge other people that do it differently.
Yeah. Don't judge other people that do it differently, and just be a good human.
That's right.
Says the blonde and the brunette over the mic. All right, everybody.
Have a good one.
Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.